Now, Donald Trump wants to renegotiate the U.S. position in the agreement, but what that means is unclear. Helping us explore this topic is Anna Aurilio. She's the director of Environment America of Washington, D.C. She believes President Trump is going backward in this, but we begin with Patrick Michaels, who thinks Donald Trump got it right. He's the director of the Center for the Study of Science at the Cato Institute. Thank you so much for joining us. So you were just telling me that this whole idea of renegotiation is a non-starter. Let's begin with that.
The reason is because the developing world is not going to accept a protocol or an instrument that doesn't transfer large amounts of money from the developed world. That usually means the United States. And Trump is not going to sign on to an agreement that does that. That impasse is not going to be cleared, I assure you.
I think a lot of people on both sides of this argument agree that renegotiation is not, shouldn't even be considered here. Anna, what is your thought on that?
My thought is that Donald Trump has got it totally backwards. When it comes to a sound economy for the U.S., that is impossible without a healthy planet, and he shouldn't be kicking us to the sidelines in the race to protect our health and the environment.
What about Trump's phone calls to foreign leaders, to Germany, Canada, France, and the UK, sending his surrogates out to sort of defend this decision? Are they experiencing more fallout than they thought, or why go out after this big decision's already been made?
I do not know about that, but I do know that the United States is going to continue to reduce its carbon dioxide emissions substantially, and perhaps in near-term years at a rate quicker than it would have been if we were in Paris, and here's why. With Paris and President Obama, we had the Clean Power Plan. And the last version of the Clean Power Plan allowed very little substitution of natural gas for coal for electrical generation. Natural gas only produces about 40% of the carbon dioxide per unit energy that you get out. Without the Clean Power Plan, industry is free to replace these coal-fired plants with simpler, cheaper to run, cheaper to operate, more efficient natural gas plants. So you're going to see a lot of that come on. And I suspect our emissions are going to continue to drop. Right now, they're at 1992 levels and dropping. There's not a lot of countries in the world that can say they got their emissions down to 1992 levels.
And I want to ask you about what was just said by Mr. Michaels. Also, you know, we're also hearing about all these U.S. states and cities vowing to press on. Can they collectively accomplish the Paris goals without Donald Trump and make a difference without this Paris Accord?
Well, look, I hope for the future of our planet and our kids that the states that are leading ahead and the cities that are leading the charge can absolutely step into this huge leadership void we're seeing in Washington, D.C. But make no mistake about it, the U.S. stepping back from leading the rest of the world and tackling the problem that historically we are the #1 source of pollution makes no sense. It is so unbelievably disappointing. And so, yes, Environment America and our Federation of State Groups, we were so proud that literally the day before Trump announced he was pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, the California State Senate, for example, passed a bill to get California, the 6th largest economy in the world, to 100% renewables by 2045. Now, that's real leadership and innovation, but again, it is embarrassing. I can't imagine what it's like for President Trump's staffers to have to call these other countries and say, hey, we're the #1 polluter, but we're not going to take our responsibility seriously anymore.
Patrick?
Well, 100% renewables is physically impossible. There's been a lot of papers to demonstrate that. So California can wish that it can do that.
A lot of things have been impossible and not doable. And you know what? It's not true. The price of renewables has come down dramatically. We have more renewables in the grid. The United States finally has offshore wind, which is excellent, but we have to do more. And it's time to get beyond the naysayers. And your notion that pulling out of the Paris Agreement and undoing things like the Clean Power Plan is somehow going to be good for the country, that's ridiculous.
The Paris Agreement was unenforceable. You know that.
It's ridiculous. It's
completely unenforceable. We signed on to an agreement that would reduce global temperature by 0.2 of a degree.
That is not true, and even the MIT scientist who studied that has said that's actually, he's really
he was backing and filling. If you just do Paris, you get 0.2 of a degree. Those are his numbers. Those are the EPA's numbers. Those are the federal government's climate impacts model, which is the model for the assessment of greenhouse gas-induced climate change, or the acronym is MAGIC.
Guys, let's look at leadership here. When it comes to global leadership, you know, climate change was something that you saw all these countries come together and have consensus with. So
Right.
with the United States moving out, what does that mean for leading in other issues, not just climate, but other global issues around the world? Can other countries
Watch
count on
United
the US?
States emissions. I believe that our emissions trajectory will continue to go down in a manner that's quite similar to what we said we would do in Paris. And that's not because of climate change, but it's because efficiency is rewarded in the market. The future belongs to the efficient is a great saying, and it happens to be true.
What do you say to all those business leaders who have come out against Trump, though? The
Fine.
big oil companies, Shell, BP, do they have a valid argument?
I don't know what their argument is. It certainly
in.
didn't make it clear to me.
To stay in. They wanted him to stay in.
I guess they want to stay in and then be told they can't sell their product or something like that, right? That doesn't make any sense.
Anna, how do you see this moving forward? I mean, where does the United States go from here?
Well, I hope the United States can get to a 100% renewable future that's absolutely efficient. And that I totally agree with Patrick Michaels. What I disagree with is that somehow magically, when we have an administration that is bent on undoing and reversing so many important protections, like the Clean Power Plan, like the clean car standards, my goodness, Donald Trump wants our cars to go further on a gallon of gasoline and emit more pollution than they're already on a trajectory to do. So we're going to have to defend against all those attacks, and we're going to have to count on the leadership states, like actually some run by Republican governors like Vermont and Massachusetts, plus California and New York and Washington, and some cities, even in deep red states like Atlanta, Georgia, that just voted to go 100% renewables. That's what we're going to have to do, but it's going to be a lot harder because we're not seeing the leadership at the top. And in fact, what we're seeing is an experienced group of anti-environmental professionals that Donald Trump has put in charge of, for example, the EPA, bent on undoing years and years of progress. And that's really sad.
You know, we were in a similar position last year. A lot of people made the opposite argument against then President Barack Obama. Here we have, less than a year later, Donald Trump undoing what was signed.
That's what happens in elections.
Okay, and so my question to you is, could we see this argument come up again if there is a new president?
Absolutely, that's my point. This is really a very symbolic thing that Trump did. If we had a Democratic president, you know, Barack Obama showed us that the Democratic president does not need a Democratic Congress to put through environmental regulations, and I assure you that there will be a Paris-like agreement arrived at within a year from when the Democratic president arrives. So this is really punctuated policy depending upon who's in charge.
Is it just politics then?
I do think, again, our emissions are going to continue to decline, and that we're doing it not, quote, to save the planet, but to save money.
All right, Anna Aurilio, we want to thank you for joining us. Patrick Michaels, a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for joining in our conversation.